Welcome everybody to End Times Bible Study. My name's Diane, and this is a weekly in-person Bible study that we have, and we live stream it through Facebook, and then it's uploaded to my YouTube channel the next day. So we have a very interesting topic tonight, and I've found like some really cool information about this topic this week, so I'm excited about it. But so we're going to be discussing the possibility that the biblical Antichrist will actually be Islamic. So tonight we're doing part 1, and we're going to revisit some of the teachings in Daniel dealing with the fourth kingdom. So specifically like Daniel 2 and 7. Now we previously had done a verse by verse of Daniel, so that's posted on my YouTube playlist. So really, I don't think if I was doing it over, I would necessarily change anything other than maybe the Fourth Empire. Some of the information with that. But the rest of it, I would say, is still pretty solid. So. But anyways, so we're going to see whether or not Rome actually is the fourth kingdom, which has been the traditional teaching for years. But we're going to look instead to see if it could be the Islamic Caliphate. And then in part 2, we're going to do a comparison and contrast of the biblical eschatology or end times teaching versus the Islamic eschatology. And in fact, there are amazing similarities between the two, and what Islam believes seems to be an inversion of what Christianity believes. So it's very interesting.
Look at these references.
Oh, there's a lot of references on there, but yeah, some of those are actually going to be for next week. So I was first working on it, and then I was like, I think we'll need to do this in 2 parts. So then I didn't bother to change. So they're all good. What?
Well, it's interesting because I see this gematria, or however you pronounce
Yes.
it. And did you see that? Did you watch that video I sent you?
I did.
Was that not interesting? And he talked, did you see where
Yes.
he mentioned the gematria and all the things that come up, 666?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like pages and
pages.
and pages.
Yes, I know. And the thing that got me though was because, I listened to some other video this past week as well, and I don't remember what it was now, but that was the second time, because his video also said that he was saying the gematria, however it's called, is actually an occult practice. And I was like horrified, because I'm like, oh my gosh, have I been doing an occult practice in this Bible study? So I looked up just to get more clarification. So I just wanted to cover that really quick, because, I was like, oh, apparently a lot of people do consider that an occult practice. But from what I found, I don't really think what we did was, because
I just find it interesting.
Yeah, well, here's...
It's not like I'm going to live by it. So
well, no.
I just find it interesting.
Yeah.
It's just like numerology to me. It's very interesting. Do I live by it? No. To me, if you live by it, then yeah.
I don't really know what the occult numerology actually is, but apparently they do use gematria in it. But this is, let me just go over. This was an article from gotquestions.org, and the reference is there. And it was, so that's a Christian website, but they said that what it is the method of assigning a numerical value to each letter of a word, name, or expression to ascertain the hidden meaning of the word. So it's apparently of Hebrew origin, although it's possible that it was a corruption of the Greek word geometria, or geometry. So who knows? But yeah, but anyways, it's a form of biblical numerology, and in late Judaism and early Christianity, gematria, I think that might be how you say it, provided a basis for numbers having religious or spiritual symbolism. So listen to this. Jewish rabbis commonly used it to interpret the Old Testament. For example, the mysterious Shiloh comes in Genesis 49:10 was understood to represent the coming Messiah, in part because in Hebrew, the letters of Shiloh comes and Messiah share the same total numerical value of 358. So I guess that's how they were using it. And they gave some more examples. And then it said it was common for Hebrew and Greek-speaking people of the Bible to add up the total numerical value of the letters used to spell a person's name and consider that the number of that person's name, as in Revelation 13:17-18, which let me just read Revelation 13:18. It says, "Here is a call for wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and that number is 666. Although apparently some translations actually say 616. So you're like, well, that could make a difference. But anyways, but so Hebrew and Greek alphabets were also used as numbers. So for us, we're like, well, this seems kind of like crazy, but back then, most people already knew. Like when you were living through it, you already knew though. You could say, oh yeah, A is one, or whatever. I mean, you know, I guess A would alpha or Greek. But anyways, in New Testament days, gematria was used to create jokes, games, and riddles associated with people's names and the names of prominent figures. So yeah, so really from that point, it doesn't seem like that is an occult sort of practice. Now this is interesting because the 2nd century church father Irenaeus, he showed how difficult it is to use gematria with any precision, noting that 666 was the sum of several names, including Euthanus, Latinos, and Teton. So his conclusion, it is therefore more certain and less hazardous to await the fulfillment of the prophecy than to be making surmises and casting about for any names that may present themselves, inasmuch as many names can be found possessing the number mentioned, and the same question will, after all, remain unsolved. And then this is cute. Ignoring the advice of Irenaeus, others throughout history have continued to use gematria to assign the role of Antichrist to various emperors, presidents, popes, and other world figures. So that was kind of funny, but...
Well, and to me, that says, just like I kind of said, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And if you're just using it kind of as an afterthought or whatever, it's one thing. If you're living by it,
right,
then yeah, it's you know, to me, it's just like astrology. I just find the stars and the planets and the different. I find it interesting. Do I live by it? No. I don't look at my horoscope every day. And, you know, to me, then that's an occult practice.
Right.
But to just be curious about it, because obviously, back in the day, they paid attention to the stars.
Right.
I think the stars are there for a reason.
Well, and even in times, stuff talks about signs in the heavens and so forth.
Exactly.
You know, like I was talking about the whole sun thing, and apparently now we're due for some major solar windstorm heading our way that can cause a bunch of disruptions and problems. I just heard that today. So anyways, it continue to have signs in the sun and so forth. But anyways, you know, so it just did say over time, most traditional Christian and Jewish groups have distanced themselves because of the, you know, numerology thing that other people are using it as an occult practice. But, you know, but yeah, like there is that calculator, which we did before online. You can plug in a name and then it'll give you the outcome. And as Anne showed the video she sent me, there was just pages and pages of all these ones for 666. So, I mean, Irenaeus didn't have that option to be able to scroll through hundreds of pages.
It was crazy because he went page by page.
Because wasn't it like
hundreds? I mean, each page just had.
Well, I don't think that was from the Bible. I thought that was just names that had been put in. Like it looked like it was about I thought it was about like 1,400 pages or something.
Crazy.
It was like a lot of with just all these 666, all these things that added up to it. So, you know, but I mean, to me, it, like the Bible is saying, if you have wisdom, calculate the number. So, but I'm still looking into this more because another thing I've heard is that the 666 is actually the Greek symbols are actually Arabic, and it's really pointing to like this whole Islamic-Antichrist thing. But I don't know. I'm still researching on that, but that is, you know, trying to look back at the original manuscripts and so forth. So, which is challenging, but they're actually online. You can look back at the oldest ones they have. They're not the actual, I don't think original, but like Codex Vaticanus or whatever. But anyways, all right. Well, so let's get back to the kingdoms and so forth. So I'm mainly using tonight this book, Mideast Beast by Joel Richardson. So I actually had read his book Islamic-Antichrist back in like 2009, and then at the time I wasn't like teaching anything. I was kind of like, you know, he talked about the Islamic-Antichrist, and I think it's just one of those things where, honestly, the idea of the idea of the Antichrist is bad enough, but if it's an Islamic one, just seemed even worse. And so I think I kind of just shelved the idea. I didn't really think too much about it. And then when I really got into we started this End Times Bible study in 2020, and all the stuff I picked up was all just talking about Rome and revised Roman Empire and all that. So anyways, it's kind of interesting because then once I started studying on my own, realizing like this Gog-Magog war thing is not matching what we've been taught about that, is not matching the chronology, and really started studying it out for myself and the Daniel study and everything that was pointing to with like the Antichrist coming from possibly Turkey and all these different things. And then I did an internet search and came across Joel Richardson once again and found he has some other books. So it's very interesting stuff. But let's start because we're going to review Daniel 2. So Daniel chapter 2, as you recall from our study, that it was Nebuchadnezzar has this dream of this statue, and where's Daniel? There we go. And so Daniel ends up giving him the interpretation. So we're not going to go back and read the entire thing. We're going to pick it up with verse, what did I put down on here? 29 through 45. So Daniel's comes the king and says, all right, this is where in verse 9, as you lay on your bed, O king, your thoughts turned to the future, and the revealer of mysteries made known to you what will happen. And to me, this mystery has been revealed, not because I have more wisdom than any man alive, but in order that the interpretation might be made known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. So one thing Richardson pointed out, which really didn't strike me before, but this is a pagan Babylonian king, and it's basically to give him the information about empires that would come after him. And as we noticed, all the empires, it just keeps recapitulating itself. It's like they're pretty much the same land areas as you keep going through, but just with different people in charge. So I thought that was a good point. But he said, as you, O king, were watching, a great statue appeared. A great and dazzling statue stood before you, and its form was awesome. The head of the statue was pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were part iron and part clay. So really, we've always talked about like the 4 empires, but really it's 5. Because the feet, they're part iron and part clay. There's like a distinction there. So, I think commentators always realize the 4th and 5th were tied together. That's why if the 4th one's Rome, then it's a revised Roman Empire. But if the 4th one actually is like the Islamic Caliphate, it's like a revised Islamic Caliphate. So you guys have that little handout too if you want to look at that. So as you watched, a stone was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold were shattered and became like chaff on the threshing floor in summer. The wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that had struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given sovereignty, power, strength, and glory. So the first one is definitively identified as Babylon in the text. Wherever the sons of men or beasts or of the field or birds of the air dwell, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. But after you there will arise another kingdom inferior to yours, which is always believed to be Persia, because that was next. And later in chapter 7, or actually chapter 8, Persia's mentioned by name. Next, the third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule the whole earth, and that would be Greece. Finally, there will be a 4th kingdom as strong as iron, for iron shatters and crushes all things. And like iron that crushes all things, it will shatter and crush all the others. And just as you saw that the feet and toes were made partly of fired clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. So notice crushing, division, yet some of the strength of iron will be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with clay, so the peoples will mix with one another, but will not hold together any more than iron mixes with clay. So again, mix. So we're going to go back to all 3 of those points. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will shatter all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but will itself stand forever. And just as you saw a stone being cut out of the mountain without human hands, and it shattered the iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold, So the great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy. So he's basically talking about, these really 5 kingdoms that the stone cut out by that's not by human hands. It's like a supernatural thing. It's like God doing it. Hits the feet of the statue and everything, is crushed and destroyed. And that's where Jesus, he comes back. We have Revelation 19. He's going to set up his millennial reign from Jerusalem. And all the other, there's no more of these other kingdoms. Like it's all, it's now just God's kingdom on the earth. Okay, so let's then read Daniel 7, and we're going to look at, I think let's do verses 2 through 28. So again, this was written in Aramaic. It's the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon. Daniel has a dream, and then he wrote it down. So in verse 2, Daniel declared, "In my vision in the night I looked, and suddenly the 4 winds of heaven were churning up the great sea. Then 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, each one different from the others. The first beast was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man and given the mind of a man." So again, that's believed to be Babylon. Suddenly another beast appeared which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. So it was told, "Get up and gorge yourself on flesh." So that one would be Medo-Persia. Next, as I watched, another beast appeared. It was like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. So Greece, again, that one always seems pretty straightforward, because with the 4 divisions after Alexander the Great's death. And both of these 2 kingdoms, because Medo-Persia is the horned ram in Daniel 8:20, and then Greece is the shaggy goat in chapter 8, verse 21. So they're specifically named. So all 3 of these other kingdoms are named within Daniel, but the 4th kingdom is never named. Now, one day I was just, after we already did our Daniel study, I was like looking at this, and it just like jumped out to me, because I'm like, we start with verse 7, it starts talking about the 4th beast. I feel like that's jumping directly to the final Antichrist kingdom. Like, I feel like it doesn't mention anything else. It just, it just skips directly to that. Because look at the text. After this, as I watched in my vision in the night, suddenly a 4th beast appeared, and it was terrifying, dreadful and extremely strong, with large iron teeth. So there is the iron there mentioned, but it devoured and crushed. So again, crushed. Then it trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the beasts before it, and it had 10 horns. So, the 10 horns, that always seems correlated with the beast in Revelation. And so that's where I'm feel like it actually just went directly to that. While I was contemplating the horn, suddenly another horn, a little one, came up among them, which that's the Antichrist. Yeah. And the 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. And of course, we correlated before with Revelation 17:11, where it talks about all that. This horn had eyes like those of a man and a mouth that spoke words of arrogance. So there's the Antichrist. So it's just...
Mine says speaking great things.
Speaking great things. Yeah. Okay. And then, so then I'll just kind of summarize this quickly. From verse 9, it's, then thrones were set in place. The Ancient of Days took his seat. Then, the court was convened, books were opened. Okay, then picking up in verse 11. Then I kept watching because of the arrogant words the horn, which is the Antichrist, was speaking. As I continued to watch, the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. So again, we talked about this before when we looked at this, that maybe that's more referring to the beast here is more the empire, the kingdom. It's like, and if this is like the Islamic Caliphate, would that be indicating just the total destruction of Islam at this point? And then we know that the Antichrist also is killed, or it says he's thrown alive into the lake of fire in Revelation 19. So now 12 has always been a puzzling verse, and Joel Richardson actually did have an explanation for this, because it says, as for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was removed, but they were granted an extension of life for a season and a time. And I think the thing is, it's like, okay, these kingdoms were not coexisting together. They were, they were at different periods of time, and like one would conquer the other. And so I think, but this makes it sound like they're all coexisting at the same time. But what he was saying was that it was really, okay, they are not saying that the other three kingdoms would be contemporaries of the final antichristic empire. The point is simply to contrast the nature of the final empire's destruction, which will be sudden, utter, and complete, with the destruction of the previous empires, which, though conquered, often lived on to a degree in the empire that subjugated them. In other words, while the Greek Empire was conquered by the Romans, it very much lived on in the Roman Empire. And, like Greek was the common language throughout the Middle East under the Romans. The Romans embraced the Greek pantheon of gods and gave them, their own names. But, so I think he was just saying that, and that actually made sense to me. It's like, okay, the other kingdoms kind of went their way over the centuries and still kind of, lived on to a certain extent with, whatever. But the Antichrist kingdom is just a sudden end, that will happen at the end of the days, I guess you could say. So any comments on that before we move on? Questions, thoughts? What do you guys think? Did that seem like that made more sense than what we did before? Yeah. So, it's interesting because go ahead.
Well, I'm not so convinced yet in terms of,
that it's not Rome.
Right, otherwise, why is Rome left out? And I understand you're saying because it didn't wipe out these other civilizations, but I don't know.
Why is it left out? Well, but if you think about it, with these four empires, they're also leaving out the Ottoman Empire. That was what came after Rome, and that seems to be left out. And unless you consider, that's in a sense the Islamic empire, sort of. But and it also does ruin my pet theory, because I was always like, why is it just those four kingdoms? Because there have been other world empires. But again, it's dealing with just this kind of, everything's very Israel-centric, it's like, and so my theory had been previously that, okay, well, these were the empires that actually ruled over Israel, and then Israel went out of existence as a country under Rome. So therefore, that's why they don't mention the Ottoman Empire or anything afterwards. But, so that does kind of ruin my pet theory, if it turns out. Well, yeah.
As long as you have, but I'm just trying to understand if the fourth could be the Roman Empire, and then the feet of mixed iron be the Ottoman.
Oh, okay. Or not really the Ottoman, but just the feet could be
Ottoman.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, you know what, it actually is getting a little bit hot now. Can you turn that down, please?
Really?
We had a little disagreement earlier because I had it set for 77 in here because it's freezing outside. Okay, thank you. But anyways, well, the other thing too is that even when I was still believing Rome is the fourth empire, we still had made it work, because we were like the Eastern Roman Empire, but Turkey was part of it, and we felt like, okay, everything is indicating the Antichrist coming out of Turkey, and that was part of the Roman Empire. I mean, the Eastern Roman Empire, the capital was Constantinople in Turkey, Antioch, which was the king of the north, that's in modern day Turkey, and Antakya. So these different other things that were pointing that way. So in some ways I feel like, well, but let's keep going, because he did have some compelling points, I thought, on why it was the Islamic thing. But all right, so let's see. So back to verse 13. Okay, then in verse 13 he sees Jesus coming, basically, receiving the dominion. All right, so then verse 15. Daniel was grieved in my spirit, and the visions in my mind alarmed me. I approached one of those who were standing there, and I asked him the true meaning of all this. So he told me the interpretation of these things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who will arise from the earth, but the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. So, now after the stone, if you think back to this is like more new information really that's given. Then, or was it? I think it was. But anyways, then I wanted to know the true meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others. So again, think about that. It keeps stressing how this was so different, and Islam actually is kind of different from everything else. But it's extremely terrifying, devouring and crushing with iron teeth and bronze claws. Now he adds in bronze claws, then trampling underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn whose appearance was more imposing than the others, with eyes and with a mouth that spoke words of arrogance. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the saints and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days arrived and pronounced judgment in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for them to possess the kingdom. So that's talking about the last 3.5 years and then the end of the tribulation. This is what he said. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on the earth, different from all the other kingdoms, and it will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and crush it. Of course, if you think about it, the Antichrist kingdom will be different because it's this total worldwide domination, basically. I mean, it's... and the 10 horns are 10 kings who will arise from this kingdom. And from them another king, different from the earlier ones, will arise and subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and oppress the saints of the Most High, intending to change the appointed times and laws, and the saints will be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. So 3.5 years. All right, so we'll stop there. I mean, it just basically then, the kingdom, the sovereignty, dominion, and greatness of the kingdoms under all the heaven will be given to the people, the saints of the Most High, etc. So that's the good news out of all that. All right, so we already kind of went through, the silver chest and arm, or the head of gold / lion, Babylon, silver chest, the arms / bear, 2-horned ram, Medo-Persia, bronze belly and thighs, leopard, shaggy goat, Greece, iron legs, beast with no known correlation to the animal kingdom. So that is interesting that there's nothing. But if you remember from Revelation 13, it had those first 3 animals were combined for the beast that comes up out of the sea in Revelation, which is the Antichrist. So let's see here. Where was I? And then, so is it Rome or is it the Islamic Caliphate? And it will shatter and crush all the others. It will be a divided kingdom, part iron and part clay feet, 10 horns. Is that a revised Roman Empire or a revised Islamic Caliphate? And then the toes, kingdom, partly strong, partly brittle. People will mix but won't hold together. All right, so I think I kind of already went through some of the notes on here just as we were talking, so we'll skip over that. All right, so let's look on page 2, the outline. So crush. So this crush, division, and mixed were like the 3 key points of really the 4th and 5th empires. So geographically, Medo-Persia and Greece both conquered Babylon. Medo-Persia conquered Babylon, and then Greece conquered Medo-Persia. And so, interesting with Rome, because having looked at these maps before, like the Roman Empire, it shows, it really, like on this one, it really doesn't even show as far over, because like it's like Syria, Israel area is here, and it kind of cuts it off. Let me see, I think I have another one, but, it didn't seem like, okay, see the orange is the main Roman Empire, but then the purple was actually just very brief. I think like what happened, there was this Emperor Trajan, he went and conquered, like, at that point, Babylon was apparently, the city itself was like kind of in ruins or whatever, and Susa, I think, which was, wasn't that in Elam? But they went over there and like conquered it, but, the area, so to speak. But then he ended up like possibly having a stroke and then had to go back, and he ended up dying. And then Hadrian, who succeeded him, was just like, well, this isn't worth the effort. We don't have enough manpower to really maintain this. So apparently this really was only for a few months that they even had that area. So for the most part, their Roman Empire was just like this orange area. So I'm like, well, that's interesting that it's not really, because if you're trying to say, okay, which empires like really crushed the other ones. So Richardson gives some maps here. So I'll show them to you guys, and maybe I have to just pass them around because they're kind of small. But the first one is showing like the circle is Babylon. Okay, so that's the Babylonian Empire. Then the second one is the Medo-Persian Empire, which there's Babylon. So yeah, so that was, to me, that was apparently the Medo-Persian Empire was that was like the largest empire in the world at that, up into that historical point, supposedly. So, okay, then you have Greece. So again, there's Babylon. Then you have Rome. So he only shows, so Rome was really more Western by and large. It really didn't have that much that was to the east. So, and then this is what he gives for the Islamic Caliphate. Now, yeah, but I've been kind of confused about that because, when I looked back at the map when we did this before, that was the Islamic Caliphate map that I came up with, but he seems to show a lot more, because this one still seems fairly similar to like really Rome, or some of the, like they all are fairly similar. I'll pass it around because like I said, they just keep recapitulating each other. But I don't know if either he has some better resources for maps than I do, or was he just, because all these countries are Islamic countries, so was it like, okay, because they're all just Islamic and they're all under this Islamic Caliphate. So I'm still, and I will say right now, I am not an expert on all this history or even Islamic theology. So if anybody knows out there or has some resources, feel free to share, help me out. But yeah, if his thing is correct, what he's saying is that basically this is the only empire that really crushed all the others. Versus, as compared to Rome. So that's one of his points there. And then, let me see here. Oops, I just lost all my notes. Hang on, sorry. Okay. All right, so that was like geographically. And then, so then if you talk about the culture, religion, and language, that's another way you could crush people. And so the Islamic Caliphate, so Muhammad died, and after his death, they were trying to figure out like who should take his place. And but the Caliphate began in 632 AD. So it's basically like the Caliph, I think is how you say it, is just like it's kind of similar almost to the like Catholic Pope, but it's like the main religious figure who's like leading them. So, and we'll talk about this more next week when we get into the Mahdi, who's, the Islamic Messiah, basically, in which we think is the Antichrist. But, so they had this caliphate going, and then after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell, because they had sided with Germany and they lost, and so then the Republic of Turkey was basically born, and then the rest of the Middle East and the Ottoman Empire was like sectioned off, into what it is today, I think, more or less. But Ataturk was the big reformer dude who was in charge at that time for Turkey, and he abolished the caliphate. Like they didn't have it anymore, so they really have not had this Islamic caliphate since that time. So that is one of their issues, is that, like ISIS actually declared, that they declared a caliphate, back a few years ago, and which was kind of ignored by the rest of the Muslim world. But some of these hardliners, I think that's one of their goals, is to get back, and, this Mahdi will be like the final caliph, I believe. And yeah, so we'll look at that more next time. But as far as Islam goes, and I have studied Islam some in the past, and honestly, it was a scarring experience. Just the brutality, and, we've seen what Hamas just did, and I mean, those atrocities that Hamas just did to the Jews are like they're like unspeakable. I mean, they're so horrific. So sadly, this is a whole long centuries of this sort of behavior that's been going on, but I mean, this is what he says. In contrast to the Roman Empire, the Islamic Caliphate from its inception was an Arab Islamic supremacist force that crushed and erased the cultures and religions of the people it conquered. This is due to the uniquely all-encompassing ideology of Islam, which includes every facet of life. So, I mean, they, dictate law, government, language, military, even sexual and hygienic practices. And the very name Islam means submission to the laws of Allah, the Muslims' God, as well as the practices of Muhammad, their prophet. So Islam is the epitome of a totalitarian ideology. So wherever Islam spread, it brought with it this oppressive ideology of submission. Islam conquered all the regions of the former Babylonian, Medo-Persian, and Grecian empires. It exported and imposed the Arabic language onto a vast proportion of its conquered people. Today, in Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and throughout much of North Africa, the people speak Arabic. So while the Persians and Turks have retained their own languages, their alphabets were both Arabized. So it goes on, but I mean, the bottom line is, and just from the stuff I've learned from studying Islam, I mean, they go into these, lands they conquer. Often they would just, if you didn't become Islamic, or become Muslim, or we'll kill you. So a lot of people were just killed. Or if they didn't kill you, then it's like you could, you were called a dhimmi, and you had this bottom feeder of society sort of status, and you had to pay the jizra tax. And so you were kind of allowed to subsist, but, you didn't really have any real rights. And like I said, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. So, and even people within Islam, like if you leave Islam, say you convert to Christianity or something, I mean, sometimes your own family members will kill you. I mean, so it's a very violent situation that's just, ruled with an iron fist, I guess you could say. So I think when you think about like crushing, I mean, because I remember when we did the Daniel study, we were talking about Rome, because one commentator is kind of like, oh yeah, they like crush the people. But do you remember we had this discussion, because we were like, well, other commentators were like, well, Rome pretty much, like they would conquer the people, but they generally could still continue on with whatever gods they were worshiping. And, it didn't really crush them. Like now with Israel, they were rebelling against Rome's rule, and that's why Rome came in the late 60s, 60 AD or 64 AD, whenever it started, but then they came in, and that's why eventually then in 70 AD, they finally were successful in conquering Jerusalem and destroying the temple and so forth. So, so that was kind of an interesting point there, but
just real quick, I came across this meme. Imagine a religion whose followers admit they want to kill you, but they say you have a phobia if you don't want to be killed. I mean, well,
I know. And even with Hamas, it's apparently in their own charter, which is that like Israel has no right to exist, and they, need to be, like it's like, well, I'm sorry, but you really can't coexist with people that are trying to kill you. And I don't think a lot of people in the world really understand what Israel is up against. Being this tiny country surrounded by all these massive Muslim nations, many of which who are, just like rabidly against them and want them destroyed and the people killed. So, But anyways, getting back to this, so that was the crush part. Then the division part was after Muhammad's death, division immediately broke out. So you have like the Shias or the Shiite Muslims. They wanted Muhammad's successor to be one of his relatives because that was the promise. Like, okay, well, who's now going to succeed him? But then the Sunni Muslims, they wanted it to be one of his companions. So today, apparently, Shias make up about 10% of the Muslims and the Sunnis 90%.
Wow.
And I think under the 10% of the Shias, because they have a few other sects of Islam, but I think so that's kind of included in that 10%. So, but yeah, the Sunnis are the majority. And then mixed, now this was a fascinating point. Daniel 2:43. So remember, it's written in Aramaic, but that's where he says, okay, so let me just read it real quick. As you saw the iron mixed with clay, so the peoples will mix with one another, but will not hold together any more than iron mixes with clay. Well, apparently the word for mixed is literally Arab. Yeah, and so I'm going to read what Richardson says. Yeah, because he had apparently the Arab people, because here I'm just going to read it to make sure I say it right. But all right, in the ancient Middle East, the Arabs were viewed as the mixed desert peoples. In Hebrew, the word is Arab. If that's it, it's E-R-E-B. I don't know, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Because the descendants of Ishmael and Esau had so intermarried among the various desert pagan tribes, they had essentially become known collectively as the mixed ones. So, and then skipping down a little bit, he said, let's see. In the ancient Near East, the words mixed and Arab were synonymous. The very name Arab in its etymological origins refers to the mixed people that lived primarily to the east of Israel. So a literal translation of Daniel 2:43 then is, quote, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will be Arab, and they will not remain united just as iron does not mix with clay. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So, all right, but now the main thing for me, because I've thought about this before, like, well, are we sure Rome's even, like, are we sure it's the fourth empire? And I always came back to Daniel 9:26. So, I mean, and I don't think it's unreasonable that so many people, including myself, have, I was really just going with the commentaries and so forth, but it made sense because Rome is the fourth empire that, they conquered Greece. So historically, you'd be like, yeah, okay, of course it's Rome. And Daniel 9:26 says, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing. Then the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So of course we're like, well, that's Rome. The end will come like a flood, and until the end there will be war. Desolations have been decreed. But now here's where it gets really interesting. So who are the people? So you think, okay, all these legions, these Roman legions, attacked Jerusalem and conquered it in 70 AD and destroyed the temple. Well, reforms by Emperor Augustus in 15 AD allowed non-Italian soldiers to make up the armed forces. Because basically their empire was so big, they didn't have enough Italians to man like the entire, all their conquered areas. So these were known as provincials, and it was made up of citizens who lived in the provinces. So two historians at the time, Tacitus and Josephus, both described the Roman legions who carried out the attack against Jerusalem in 70 AD. So 6 legions were used, all of whom were stationed in the Middle East. And so I have another map, because it was like Judea, Syria, Egypt, and Asia Minor, which Asia Minor is Turkey. But so from this map, you can see, there's Syria up here. Let's see, where's Judea? There's Judea and Jerusalem here. So that, so they had a legion from Judea. Of course, Egypt is down here. And then Turkey, you can't see it, but they would have been Asia Minor. Turkey was, up that way. So, so I'll pass that map around too. But anyways, so you've got these people basically from the surrounding area that are all making up these legions. So there was hopefully I'm saying this right, the 5th Macedonia was Judea, the 10th Fretensis was Syria, the 15th Apollinaris, Syria, and then just the 18th was Egypt. The 3rd Gallica, Syria, and the 12th Fulminata was Asia Minor, Syria. So the people who were actually doing the destruction were not like, they were Middle Eastern people. So he goes on to say all these legions would have consisted of a majority of Eastern soldiers, Arabs, Syrians, Egyptians, etc. By 70 AD, not only the Eastern provincial legions, but literally the entire army had come to be dominated by provincials, according to Mideast. All right, and then modern scholars apparently have also studied this, have agreed, with this assessment. So there's that. So finally, the Roman leadership did not want the temple destroyed. Now, again, this is from Josephus, Josephus was a Jew who was originally fighting against them and then switched sides and went over to the Roman side, and then he was recording all the stuff and he was in with the Roman leadership. So obviously, whatever he's recording historically, he's not going to put something that wasn't favorable to the Romans. But according to him, somebody, they were not supposed to destroy the temple, that they did not, the Roman leadership did not want it destroyed. And then one of the soldiers threw a flaming, torch into the, caught it on fire. And then Titus was he was the guy who later became emperor, but he was the guy there. He was trying to get the fire put out and stop it unsuccessfully. So I'm like, well, that's all very interesting. So then if we look at the actual translation of the word people in Hebrew, it's the word am, which I don't know if that's just pronounced am or what, but anyways, am, which has an ethnic denotation. Quote, it does not refer to the kingdom or empire under which the people lived, but rather the people themselves. And that's Richardson, page 98. Hebrew scholar Arnold Fruchtenbaum, which was also quoted in this book, states, we are dealing here with a bloodline, not a country. If a kingdom or empire were in view here, the more appropriate Hebrew words would be mamlaka, kingdom or empire, or goy, meaning nation. Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting. So I'm like, well, but a lot of these people who were fighting in these legions, they hated Israel, and it goes back to this was actually I came up on Facebook today, but Abraham's descendants. You have Abraham, and Sarah. Isaac is the promised son. That's who the Messiah was going to come through that line, and the whole nation of Israel and all that. But Hagar, who was Sarah's maidservant that she gave to him to have a child, she has Ishmael. So from Ishmael you get the Arab nation, then you get Muhammad, then you get Islam. But from Sarah you get Isaac, you get the Jewish people, you get Jesus, Christianity, and Judaism. So that's kind of in a nutshell. But really the problem is, for this whole Middle East problem, even now, it's, kind of in the news a lot and all this stuff happening. But these issues developed, thousands of years ago, and they've just continued to be a problem. So that's kind of that. But okay. So what do you think, Bo? Now that you've heard all the evidence, do you still think it's Rome, or what's your thoughts?
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, Anne.
I agree. I don't know if I'm convinced.
Yeah.
Either way yet.
Right. Dean, what do you think?
I might have to ponder on it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very interesting.
I think a lot of it, though, does kind of correlate with that video that I sent you, which, when you look at it, like the way he says the mark of the beast is really the evil.
Right.
And you can kind of see that in correlation with Islam. It kind of almost goes hand, you would think.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to force you to do something that you don't want to do, or you won't be able to buy or sell anything.
Right.
It just kind of
Yeah.
Kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and also another thing I've been researching and haven't really had time to finish it, but it's almost like a law. Like there is some stuff out there that's saying. Remember when we were doing Babylon? It was talking about the moon god's sin. That actually might be the Allah, and that really what Muhammad did was the people in that area were worshiping, they were polytheistic, and he came along and said, well, this God, the sin God, the moon God, is the true God. And so because their symbol is like the crescent and the star, apparently all these things have been dug up all over the Middle East from ancient times with the same symbol. So anyways, I'm still like researching all that, but I'm like, I personally think Allah is like Satan or something, so there's, so I'm trying to like get more information on all that. So we'll talk about that more, once I've done some more research. But I thought that was interesting how all that seems to have a tie-in as well, so, but yeah, so it's definitely interesting. Yeah, like I said, I feel like we made it work with even the Rome being, if it's the Eastern, but I do think that as far as like the traditional teaching, and I know some people are like Amir Sarfati, I love him, he's a Messianic Jew, and but he has a whole teaching on like the revised Roman Empire, and he's coming out of Europe, and Europe is primed, and he had some very interesting stuff in there, because even like the gosh, what was that we did in the Revelation study? I'm trying to think what the building was. Was it like, but it looked like, it was built like Babel, like the Tower of Babel. And it was like maybe a UN building or something over in Europe. But do you remember? Yeah, I remember the picture and stuff, but I'm trying to remember, I don't remember offhand what the building was. But anyways, he had stuff like that he was pointing out. But I do think it seems more likely. And you hate to say, well, just because of the geopolitical things going on right now. With what's going on right now, it definitely seems more likely.
I was going to say, with the geopolitical scene right now in the U.S. and
right,
how you can't, I don't know, you just can't say anything pro-Israel. You can't say, I don't know, it's crazy. And then everybody seems to be pro-Muslim, pro-Islam, pro-everything. It's like, I can totally see people bowing down to somebody coming out of that area.
Yeah.
I can totally see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you had said about, it's the people and not
Yeah.
And you've got your, just like you said, you are quite, respectful of Amir Safadi and people who believe in various interpretations. So what is it that we're really called to understand as we work through this mystery of, what do all these things mean?
Right.
And I think one of the things that is the consistent is this, in a sense, anti-Western culture, which is really built a lot from some Judeo-Christian principles. And it's just incredible that, saw an article where, young progressive women are converting over to Islam. And it's more seems like it's just being anti-Western culture, i.e. anti-Christian, Judeo-Christian culture. It's and when you look at this whole history with the Ottoman Empire, other things, there really has been this whole, East versus West conflict that the West isn't always riding the white horses or doing the right things or those kind of situations.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we can consistently see that we're in this spiritual battle.
Yeah.
Of, in a sense, following this one true God based on love and grace and forgiveness, and fighting against this whole, just
Yeah, you can't.
You can't even name it in a singular because it's so many different things. Whether it's, to me, how you end up with the same people that want the Children's Hour drag show also want the Palestinians to rule from sea to sea.
Right. Don't they
It's
understand that that's not allowed?
How is it that you're on the same, and the only answer that seems to be on that is it's just anti-God. Whether, you don't want to just say Satan, but it's just this rebellion against the one true God. And the only
common denominator.
Exactly. The only common denominator is this hatred of Christianity or God. And it compels these people to somehow
Yeah, but
align.
look at the satanic, like the Wiccans. I mean, they've even grown massively in the past decade.
Yeah.
I mean, people are just headed towards that satanic. I don't even know.
That doesn't surprise me because you know what? The entertainment culture for several decades has been pushing all
Back
this.
since Bewitched.
Yeah, Bewitched was, which I used to watch that when I was a child, but dark.
I watched it for entertainment.
Right.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't actually believe in it.
Right. Yeah, so, but yeah, I think that a lot of the media has been hugely, just unbelievable in the way it has shaped the generations, because even then with, homosexuality and also, if you've ever noticed this, but Christians are always portrayed on the media as like either, buffoons or stupid, or else they're the evil, they're the bad guy. They're never, Little House on the Prairie might have been one exception, but, some of the older stuff, but all the stuff that was really from my era and on was always very negative. So the media's a problem, but to your point too, and I did want to kind of say this as well about, sorry, somehow my camera thing is messed up. I think I broke it. Now it's like on a slant, but, does this really matter? Does it matter if it's Rome versus, but I do think in a sense, like if we hadn't done this study and I was still like, just, after like having done like maybe the 2020 Bible study and that's all we had done, and I'd be like, well, okay, well, when's the Gog of Magog war happening? And we're still waiting for a revised Roman Empire. It's like almost like you're looking in the wrong place. And so I feel like it does matter from the point of biblically, we should be able to look at what the Bible is saying and then understand what's coming. And I think to me, this has enabled me to be able to do that. Like I said, we had made Rome work, even if it was the Fourth Empire. So, as far as that goes, but, it did seem like the Islamic one fit the scenario better, and you still not so sure, Bo?
Well, I think you had a lot of good points before about, we're talking about Israel.
Yeah.
Not about, and the times that were done. And I'm not, like I said, this is interesting, but I wouldn't say we are saying that it's, I'm not saying it's anything. I'm just saying it's interesting.
Right.
And, And I think that, you know, I mean, it's interesting because we've seen that we have the Dome of the Rock right on top of
Yeah.
the place of
Mount.
the temple.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just, I think it's all interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it's good to always, oops, my thing just came off of the stand. I think it's good to just try to really understand what the text is saying, and, you know, as information comes out, you know, but like I said, I mean, I certainly wouldn't fault anybody. I mean, you know, I mean, I was certainly, like, let's assume that it is the Islamic Caliphate, and I was falsely teaching it was Rome, you know. It's like, well, you know, I mean, I was doing it with a good faith effort with, you know, based on commentaries and all the sources I was using, but I think it's good to keep in mind alternate viewpoints as well. So, but we'll get in next week more with the whole, you know, comparing the Islamic Messiah to the true Messiah, and that's pretty interesting stuff there. So, all right. Any other final? I guess it's 8:00. Any other final comments or questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, as always, if you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, today is the day. So there's no better decision you could ever make in your life than to turn your life over to Him, because Jesus loves you. He came to earth as God the Son. He died a terrible death on the cross and took all of our sins upon Himself and paid the price for them. So He offers it as a gift to us to be reconciled back to Him by just accepting, you know, believe in Jesus as the Son of God and repent of your sins, and Holy Spirit comes to live inside of you, and you become a new creation in Christ. So it's a great thing, and I highly recommend it. So, all right, well, hope to see y'all next week. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me. All right, God bless.